In a world of unanswered questions and unsolved riddles, one clue can change everything. You're listening to The Last Clue, where mysteries don't just get solved, they get experienced. I'm Jessa, guiding you through the shadows of each case. What you hear might disturb you, what you miss might deceive you, and what you discover might surprise you. Ready your notebooks and sharpen your instincts. The most observant among you will earn immortality on our wall of fame. The mystery begins now. The Vanishing Guest, Episode 1, A Room with No Exit. Welcome, dear listener, to a place where time stands still, where the walls whisper secrets and shadows linger long after they should be gone. Tonight we check into Willow Crest Inn, a charming bed and breakfast nestled deep in the countryside, a place where guests arrive with the promise of rest, but not all of them leave. Lena Carter was one such guest. She arrived on a rainy evening seeking nothing more than a quiet retreat. She was polite, reserved, and, according to the innkeeper, completely ordinary. But by sunrise, Lena Carter was gone. Her room was locked from the inside. Her suitcase remained untouched. And yet, there was no sign of her anywhere. A disappearance with no explanation. A guest who seemingly vanished into thin air. Or was something waiting for her in the darkness? It was just after dusk when Lena arrived at the Willow Crest Inn. The house stood like a relic of another time, its wooden beams worn with age, ivy curling up the sides like grasping fingers. The warm glow of lanterns flickered from within, promising comfort, despite the eerie emptiness of the countryside around it. Margaret Hale, the innkeeper, greeted Lena at the door with a practiced smile. She was a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of hospitality, but even she seemed uneasy that night. Perhaps it was the storm rolling in. Perhaps it was something else. Margaret led Lena through the narrow halls, past antique furniture and faded portraits. The air smelled of lavender and something more subtle. Old wood, dust, something Lena couldn't quite place. She was given room 6, a cozy chamber at the end of the hallway. A room with a history. A room where guests rarely stayed for more than a single night. The Willow Crest Inn had stood for over a century, its walls collecting stories like dust in forgotten corners. Local legends spoke of strange occurrences, guests who had heard voices in empty rooms, doors that locked themselves, and shadows that moved against the light. Margaret Hale had inherited the inn from her grandmother, along with all its secrets. The guest book told stories of its own, names crossed out, pages torn away, and sometimes, in the margins, hastily scribbled notes that made no sense. "Don't stay in room 6, one read. "The mirror watches," said another. Margaret had dismissed these as pranks, the scribblings of bored travelers. But lately, she began to wonder. That evening, as she led Lena to room 6, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The air felt heavier, like the moments before a storm. The portraits on the walls, faces of strangers from another time, seemed to follow their movement, and when she opened the door to room 6, the mirror on the far wall caught her reflection. Or did it? For a moment, just a breath, she could have sworn she saw someone else looking back. By morning, Lena Carter was gone. Margaret knocked on the door at 7 a.m., carrying a tray of breakfast, freshly baked scones, warm tea, and a folded newspaper. No response. Another knock. Silence. Concerned, she tried the doorknob, but it was locked. A small frown crossed her face. Strange. She always advised guests to leave the doors unlocked for morning service. Fumbling with a spare key, she finally let herself in. The bed was perfectly made. The suitcase was untouched. Lena's phone rested neatly on the nightstand, its screen still glowing from the last text she had sent at 1:37 a.m. A message that simply read, "I know what you did." But Lena herself? Gone. The investigation began immediately. Deputy Sarah Chen arrived first, her flashlight beam cutting through the morning shadows. She was young, ambitious, and thoroughly skeptical of the inn's reputation for strange occurrences. But even she couldn't explain what she found. The room was a puzzle that refused to make sense. Lena's clothes were still hanging in the closet, arranged with careful precision. Her laptop set on the desk, the screen black and cold. A half-empty glass of water stood on the nightstand, lipstick marks on the rim. Everything spoke of someone who intended to return. Deputy Chan's investigation revealed more questions than answers. The windowsill was undisturbed, decades of paint making it impossible to open without leaving marks. The ventilation system was too small for a person to pass through. The floorboards, when tested, showed no signs of secret passages or hidden doors. Margaret searched the room, but nothing was out of place, except for one thing: a single muddy footprint pressed into the wooden floorboards beside the window. Not a pair, just one. The window itself was locked from the inside. No sign of forced entry, no footprints outside. The sheriff was called, of course. Sheriff Tom Davies was a practical man, one who didn't believe in ghost stories or strange happenings. He had seen enough runaways and impulsive disappearances to know that people often left for reasons no one else understood. Sheriff Davies theorized she probably walked out in the night, got cold feet. Maybe she left with someone. But that explanation didn't make sense. Her shoes were still in the room, her wallet, her coat. If she had left willingly, she had done so barefoot and without a single belonging. Sheriff Davies approached the case with methodical precision. He questioned Margaret thoroughly about Lena's arrival, her demeanor, whether she'd mentioned any plans or concerns. He interviewed the only other guest staying at the inn that night, Olivia Parker, a travel writer working on a feature about historic countryside accommodations. The sheriff combed through Lena's personal effects, searching for any clue to her identity or motivation. Her driver's license confirmed her name and a Boston address. Her credit card statements showed a series of normal purchases: gas, food, a new dress the week before. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that suggested she was running from something or to something. Yet something about the case troubled the sheriff. The locked door, the undisturbed room, the strange timing. 1:37 a.m. and Lena's final text was sent. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. The sheriff took samples from the muddy footprint, hoping to match the soil to a specific location. He dusted for fingerprints, finding only those that should be there: Lena's, Margaret's, the cleaning staff's. He even called in a canine unit, but the dogs could only track Lena's scent as far as the bedroom door before losing it completely. People don't just vanish, Sheriff Davies insisted. But in Willow Crest Inn, perhaps they did. Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Lena hadn't left at all. And then there was Olivia Parker, the guest staying in the room next door, a travel writer passing through on her way to a research project. She claimed to have heard something strange in the early hours of the morning. A voice, a woman's voice, whispering from Lena's room at exactly 1:37 a.m. Not Lena's voice, someone else's. But when Olivia pressed her ear to the wall, trying to make out the words, the voice suddenly stopped, and in its place she heard something else, something chilling. 3 soft knocks, coming from inside Lena's room, a room that by then should have been empty. And so, dear listener, we are left with more questions than answers. Lena Carter had vanished without a trace, and yet something lingers in room 6. A single footprint, a message sent at 1:37 a.m., a whisper in the dark, and 3 ghostly knocks from within an empty room. What happened to Lena Carter? Did she run? Was she taken? Or did she awaken something she was never meant to disturb? The answer lies in the shadows, and I want to hear your theories. Send me your thoughts, your clues, your suspicions. Next time, we'll dive deeper, because one thing is certain. Lena Carter is gone, but she is not forgotten.
Always be with you.
And there you have it, another piece of the puzzle revealed in this episode of The Last Clue. Think you've solved the case? Submit your theory through our form linked on the Facebook page, The Last Clue, a mystery podcast, on Spotify, on Instagram page at The Last Clue Podcast, and YouTube channel, The Last Clue Podcast. The first correct solution earns a coveted spot on our Wall of Fame. If you're enjoying our mysteries, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast and leave a rating or review. It helps other amateur detectives find us. Join us next time as we continue to unravel the threads of this mystery. Until then, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp, because in this world, everything is a clue. This is Jessa, signing off.